More variety.
We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
You're listening to Para X. For the next 2 hours, be prepared to open your mind to the edgier side of the metaphysical world. The topics discussed may prove disturbing to some, but are all a part of the world in which we live. Welcome to the Rev and Witch Show. Listener discretion is advised. And welcome everybody to the Rev and Witch Show. You know, there are some guests that I think are really... I really think that they're more interesting than others. Not that all our guests aren't interesting, but I gotta say that there are some people out there that really hold our interest, which is why we decided to devote an entire Rev and Witch Show to this gentleman. Our guest tonight is one of Hollywood's... Well, he's the most unique historian out there. He is also the founder of findadeath.com and Dearly Departed Tours.
And he just recently did a special for E! Entertainment called Hollywood Death Trip, which followed a real-life guided tour by Scott Michaels of high-profile murders and shocking details and all kinds of good stuff that occurred in L.A. And the special kind of unravels some of the most gruesome and notorious cases that made headlines and takes a look at where these events actually unfolded. And in that vein, tonight we're going to be talking to Scott about death houses, the places where some very gruesome murders and deaths occurred, and ask the age-old question, why the hell would anybody want to live there now?
You know what, Marla? I'm always out there, and I'm wandering a lot of historic places, and slept on some pretty blood-stained battlefields, and I've, at Old Fort Niagara, I've slept in that place, and literally hundreds of people have died there. And I got to say that there is this attraction to it. I don't know what it is, but you know what? Let's bring him on, because then we can go and we can ask him these questions. What do you say?
Works for me.
I know it always does, but that's another story. Okay. Scott, you there, my friend?
Do I have to separate you two?
I don't know. It's not good.
Listen, we're
really
on two.
Not good.
Scott, we're on two coasts as it is, and I think that's too close.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me back.
Oh, well, you're always welcome, and you've always got such good stuff. And I was kind of, reading the thing about the Hollywood Death Trip and everything, and then I went over to findadeath.com, and I saw some of your DDTV stuff.
Oh,
and,
yeah, that's great. That is fantastic. His stuff is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, it is. It's thought-provoking, too, which...
That's very kind of you.
She paid me to say it, Scott. Don't let her kid you. But no, seriously, I got to tell everybody that I think that you guys do yourself a disservice. This guy puts out some great, high-powered stuff that is poignant and really... And I'm going to be honest with you. Thought-provoking. We're going to talk a little bit about your Manson work, because that to me is totally fascinating. But I'm going to turn it back over to my dear sister, because why? She's already waving a wand in my general direction, and that can't be good, Scott.
Well, I waved the wand, Scott rolls his eyes. We're doing great.
You don't want to know what I'm doing.
Samantha Stevens had her twitch. Mine is the eye roll.
You do it so well. But, when I was looking at some of the DDTV things, you're going through places that people have been murdered or committed suicide or, it's all grisly. And what makes it more fascinating on top of that, because it's like watching a train wreck. You can't take your eyes off of it. You have all these details that go along with the stories that maybe we read in the newspapers or heard on the news. You've got some of that other stuff going on, the stuff that makes you really prick up your ears. And that's what makes it even more fascinating. And, so Tim and I both kind of got a list of houses that are kind of a particular interest because a lot of interesting things happen there. And I know that you've got some backstories that go along with them. But in deference to Tim, let's start with the Manson house.
Okay.
I know that somebody is living there now, and they tore down the old house. They built the new house, and there's people actually living on that property, which is something I probably wouldn't do. But although I think everybody knows about what happened at the Manson house, you might want to give kind of a little brief summary. But I remember, too, that years ago, after the murders, you took me up there. The original house was still standing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very desolate, and they didn't have those fences that you couldn't get in either. It was just sitting there like a sore thumb.
Well, the house was owned at the time of the murders, and by a man named Rudolph Altobelli. He had rented the home out to Terry Melcher and Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere, the Raiders, and the house had been in his possession for a long time. In August of '69, when Sharon Tate and the 4 other people were slaughtered on that property, the crime scene was cleaned up and everything removed that was damaged because the house came furnished. Altobelli owned all the furniture. It came with the place. So Altobelli himself lived in that house for about 20 years, and I had an opportunity to speak with him and ask him about it, and he said the only weird thing that ever happened to me up there was the people hopping the fence to have a look at the house. So the house was, lived in up until 1990, probably 1992, 93, early 93, because the last person to live in it was Trent Reznor of the group 9 Inch Nails, and they used the living room where the murder, where Sharon and Jay Sebring's murder occurred. They used that living room as a recording studio where Marilyn Manson recorded his first album, and they recorded an album called Downward Spiral in the living room where the murder occurred. So the house may have had a stigma attached to it, but as far as I know, the house itself, or the property, maybe people weren't just sensitive enough to it. But when they destroyed the property, 2 brothers had bought the property, destroyed the house, and built another house on spec. And they were going to, build this massive house and make a fortune on it. And they lost their asses. I mean, they tried getting out of it. They stopped because they ran out of money. Then they tried selling it for $8 million, then for $6 million, then for $5 million, and it went down for under $2 million. And the man that bought the house, his name is Jeff Franklin. He's a television producer. And it took him a couple of years to complete it to his liking. So the property was actually vacant for 14 years. Nobody lived in it. So people often say, well, is that because, the weird vibes on the property? And I always say no, because the house was lived in for, 24 years after the murder. So I don't think there was I don't know what the word is, stigma, I guess, other than a notorious murder scene. I don't think there was any more going on up there, at least not to the people that were living up there.
Scott, what I always wondered is, now I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but there was so much evidence that was taken out, and there was so much left behind, as in furniture and stuff that went with the house. Did you ever find out whatever happened to a lot of that furniture or the evidence? Is the evidence still in a locker someplace, or perhaps was it auctioned off at all?
No, the evidence as far as the actual, what had to do with the actual crime, the weapons, the bloody clothes, paperwork, items that had to do with the murders themselves that were actually evidence. That's all in a storage, in an office. Occasionally, they will see the light of day on a documentary. A couple of years ago, there was an exhibit that the sheriff's or the LA police, I guess detectives, every couple of years have convention, and Los Angeles hosted the convention, but they hosted it in Las Vegas, and they brought with them some of their more iconic pieces of evidence. So I walked in the room, and because it was open to the public, I literally flew over there as soon as I heard to go see this stuff. And as soon as I walked in, was the '59 Ford that Tex Watson drove, and Manson drove, and I just about lost my mind. And then next to it were these glass cases, and in one glass case was the fork that was used to kill Lena LaBianca. One was the gun that was used to kill Stephen Barrett, J.C. Verkowski, and there was a coil of rope that was tied around Sharon and Jay's neck, and these things were there in front of me. After studying them for so many years, it was an amazing feeling. Most sane people were in and out of that room in 15 or 20 minutes, and I stayed there for hours looking at this stuff because I knew that I'd never see it again. So that stuff is all in evidence. Rosemary LaBianca's wallet that the killers took and hid in a gas station up north in Sylmar. So all that stuff is still around. Now, as far as the furniture goes, I think that Altobelli kept it. I think some of the stuff may have gone to the Tate family, but I think for the most part, the stuff that wasn't damaged by the actual murders was stayed in the house. There's an interesting subject that came up recently. I was speaking to Mark Lindsay of Paul Revere and the Raiders, and he had lived in the house with Terry Melcher prior to Candace Bergen moving in with him. And we got to talking about the murders, and he said there was a baby grand piano. It's fairly common knowledge. There's a baby grand piano in the room where Sharon and Jay's bodies were found. And he told me that he and Terry Melcher record or composed two fairly significant Paul Revere and the Raiders songs on that very piano in that very room where the murders occurred. And I thought, what an interesting piece of information. There's always something new to learn about these things.
Now here's something else I had wondered about. You're a great collector. Now, knowing how you scour everything out there, are there any objects from the Tate LaBianca murders that have actually surfaced on, let's say, the internet for sale? Because I know that there's a great market out there for murder objects and autographs and photographs and letters from serial killers. Is there anything out there that has anything really seen the light of day in private collections that people have bought?
As far as actual objects, there are websites devoted to that sort of thing. eBay won't touch that stuff anymore.
Right.
If you have anything to do with murder or something like that, they won't touch it. But there are other auction sites that will deal specifically with that sort of ephemera. And but as far as actual tangible, real objects that were used in these or had something to do with it, now I don't really ever see that. We have things, we have.
Really? I didn't know that, Scott.
Well, I have several artifacts that I found that were at the Spahn Ranch. We, several like electrical switches because the ranch burned in 1970.
Right.
So I went out there with a metal detector and I found some hinges and things like that. So these were there. There's nothing been built there since. So I know they came from the Spahn Ranch. When the Tate House was destroyed in 1993. I went up there and spoken to one of the people working there, and I asked him for a brick, and not really realizing or not really clocking the fact that it wasn't brick, but there was a lot of flagstone. And he said that I can't give you anything now, but he pointed to a pile of rocks, and he said, if you are interested, I'll leave you a rock from the fireplace. And he pointed to making it clear to me that was the fireplace. And he said, I'll leave it outside the gates for you after 5 o'clock, and you can come by after all the construction is gone, and you can pick it up. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. So I thought, all right, that works for me. So I went back up after 5, and he didn't leave it for me. However, he did point out that pile of rocks that were the fireplace. So a friend of mine and I hopped the fence and filled the back of my car with them. So I could almost reassemble Sharon Tate's fireplace in my office.
You're as bad as I am. I'm not going to lie. You really are. This is what scares me about you, Scott. Now, that the Spahn Ranch, I've seen a lot of stuff, actually, that So that, well, it came from there, but it's in evidence lockers all over the place. Now that spot, the Spawn Ranch, isn't there? Now I'm sorry if because my mind is, my brain is kind of foggy, but didn't you go up there and isn't that where you shot a lot of your a lot of footage for one of your DVDs? And isn't that cave that overhang where they have that famous iconic picture of the family kind of hanging around there? Isn't that close by?
Yeah, definitely. It's not that easy to get to, but yeah, it's still there below the property because the Spawn Ranch was there was like behind it was a sort of a stream. It was probably a bit of a river at some point in time, but at the time in the 60s it was a stream, and there's a photograph of the family underneath that rock. So yeah, we did some hiking and we did find that rock, and we were able to to clock it exactly the same rock. So there are loads of sort of places where you can hold up pictures and still see where things were, and some things still are.
Amazing, Scott. Now, Marla, you've got now. That was like on my bucket list. That was the big. It really is, because that's something that I remember poignantly as a kid. I remember exactly where I was, and I remember the news coverage as a kid. And I know that you're a lot younger than me, and Scott's a lot younger than me, so I know that it's a little hazy for you guys. But I mean, that's really one of those places that is amazing to me, and it's still amazing to me. Now, Marla, which would be your number one place where you would like to? And I know Scott's been all over the place, but what would be your number one bucket list type of location?
Well, I went to one, but it wasn't grisly or anything. I investigated Gary Cooper's old house, and it was left like kind of intact the way he left it, which was kind of interesting and neat. It was really nice. But as far as a bucket list goes, I don't know. I mean, unlike Scott, I do get kind of creeped out about some of these places that I have on this list because they're just kind of grisly and nasty. Like, well, let's take the apartment where Jack Cassidy burnt to death.
Oh, that is, yeah. It was funny, before the show I was looking up. Of course, I was on Scott's site, and I remember Jack Cassidy in a lot of shows. I remember him vividly because he was always like that really dashing type of guy. But I was surprised to find out like he was bipolar, and well, I won't go. I'm going to let Scott talk about it because I know nothing compared to Scott when it comes to these subjects.
I don't know very much at all. I know how the subjects end. That's what I know. But yeah, the home in on Kings Road in West Hollywood. It was December, I think, of 1976 that Jack was at a Christmas party with that party animal, Nanette Fabre. You know what she's like.
Yes, I do.
And he was dropped off at his house, and probably, well, no, he did have alcohol in his system. He did have a significant amount of alcohol in his system. And according to the way things played out and what people have been able to gather from the evidence, is he sat on the sofa and fell asleep with a cigarette in his hand, and within minutes the entire building was on fire. And they only found about, I believe, about 60 pounds of him. They had used dental charts to identify him. Because they thought that he had lent somebody his car and it was missing, so there was speculation that Jack was actually out of town and they didn't know who it was, so they ended up using dental charts, and the family at the end just decided to go ahead and have him cremated.
That's appropriate.
Well, there wasn't much left. Yeah. Oh, you know what?
Wait a minute. For those who don't know who Jack Cassidy was, and there might be a couple, I guess the best reference is David Cassidy from the Partridge Family's dad, and he was also married to Shirley Jones.
And Sean Cassidy's dad.
And Sean Cassidy, yes.
And okay. Patrick Cassidy's dad, too. I know these things because I was a Partridge Family guy. You know what I mean? I don't want to admit it, but yes, I was. I used to watch. But here's the thing that that I had read something that didn't they also identify him by a signet ring?
Yeah, that's right. He did have a ring on. That's right.
Now here's my question: you get this horrific fire, this incinerating fire. Was the apartment or the apartment building actually remodeled and re-rented?
Yeah. I mean, they're condos now, and the people that own the condo are friends of mine. So one day they said, "Do you want to come up and see the place?" And of course, sure. So we went up, and it's still laid out the same way. We were able to. There's a photograph that was published of the inside of the place after the fire occurred, and we were able to take the exact same photo from that exact same angle, the way it looks today. And so I'm not sure how much has changed, with the construction of the house, but the living room and the living room and the fireplace are the same. And right around the corner is the bar. And very appropriately, the guys who live there have put a portrait of Jack Cassidy above the bar. That's their way of acknowledging him, because some people think that Jack's still hanging around. I've heard a couple of stories, not from the owners, but I've heard a couple of stories from people that have been up in that house, because it changed hands a couple of times.
Well, and here's my point. When I go out and I'm looking for evidence of some kind, I rarely find evidence in the location where someone dies. Now, everybody goes and says, places of high emotional impact, blah, blah, blah. That I've seen in battlefields. Okay, that's something a little bit different. But in local residences, I have yet to ever find any kind of... Well, I'm sure there's 1,000 paranormal investigators right out there right now getting my email... starting to send me all sorts of nasty emails about this, but I've yet to ever find anybody that in a death location or a death room, an individual that's hung around. I think they've got better places to hang out. I mean, they might hang out for a day or two, but I think they're gone. I think they just want to go and hang out the places that they actually had fun at, not where they died. What do you think, Marla?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I mean, I've been to a couple places and didn't. Where you expect something to come up, it really didn't. and we, Scott, remember we had a seance over at Bordner's Bar, but who should come through but Albert Decker? Now,
oh, wow.
Albert Decker is had a very interesting passing, and the people, you were in that apartment, but funny that he would show up at a seance, right? Not anywhere near the apartment.
Well, if you sort of just pop in and out if they feel like it, can't they? I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's some people say, and this is I don't know. You would know about this stuff, but some people say that because I do what I do, and because I'm giving these people acknowledgement, maybe not in the form that they choose or would prefer. But in life, these people had pursued attention. That I'm still giving them attention. They like that. That's what I've been told by people anyway. And so maybe they're just kind of hanging around and waiting, or I don't know. It's just something that made me feel good. That they don't think that I'm mocking, because I don't. But yeah, I don't know. That's the only explanation I can think of.
Scott, go ahead. Okay. Scott, let me ask you this. I got to come right out and ask you, because I'm not sure, and I remember hearing this, I mean, from other interviews with you. What do you think is, do you actually believe that there is something after death and these celebrities may be hanging around in different locations? Or do you think kind of like, well, it might be a little bit more of imagination? Because you guys said you guys were talking about Albert Decker and a seance. What's your personal opinion of it? Because and I promise, if it's against anything that Marla and I believe in, we won't spank you. Unless you want to,
I'm just gonna lie.
Unless you want to, and that'll cost you $25 extra. But go ahead, Scott.
I mean, I think that this, it all belongs to this sort of the subheading or of paranormal activity, doesn't it? Really, I mean, it all sort of falls under that category, and I do believe that people hang around. When you were talking about people, you wouldn't want to hang around a murder location. Well, isn't it true that some people don't know they're dead and might be hanging around?
Could be, very much so.
And I wouldn't want to hang around a mortuary, which is what people are mostly afraid of, or a cemetery, because, technically they spent no living time there anyway, so I don't understand why, unless they're gravitating toward their physical bodies, I see no reason why, you would think a cemetery or a mortuary is going to be haunted. But I don't know. I do think that people are around, and maybe they're not. Some people are stuck, and some people like the attention. And with seances, I've said this before to Marla. I think you're opening up a little phone booth, and whoever's up there can pop down, and if they say who they are, and if they are who they are two different things. But I think you're opening up a little bit of a telephone booth there, and you don't know what you're going to get. But I do think that they're willing to pop in once in a while.
Well, with Decker, when we did that seance, and I'm not going to go into it because we've probably talked about it before, but the thing that kind of convinced me that it might have been him was, first of all, we were talking about it beforehand when we were there, and I don't know why it came up, but it did. Secondly, the fact that when he came through, if that was him, wanted to apologize to his family for the way he died and all the pain that they had gone through since he died, the ridicule and the gossip and all that stuff. And to me, that was kind of telling in a sense. Plus, he gave us a name, and even where this person was living of someone who had helped kick him off this planet.
Oh, wow. No, you guys got to tell me about that one. I don't remember hearing this one at all.
Well, you remember that.
Tell us about it.
Right, you were snoozing at the wheel.
No, I remember it. I remember it. And he did give us a name and a location, the Knickerbocker Hotel, where this person who supposedly murdered him lived. Or
at least assisted. But, okay, I know where you're going with this guy. I mean, I know why you're kind of saying what you're saying because, we'll talk about that later. But, but as an example, of somebody coming through and saying things that you don't expect them to hear, that maybe that's what I'm kind of putting this under, sort of a blanket thing.
I told you what happened up at, I shouldn't tell you this story. Well, I mean, because he's probably listening. It happened, and therefore I can say it. There were other people in the room. So there was David Oman owns the house. Right. It's 4 doors down from the Tate, where the Tate house used to be. And David Oman's house is haunted. There's lots of activity there. According to David, it's Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring haunting his house. Mm-hmm. Now, around the time we were putting together the documentary, The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, I went up to the house a couple of times. Once with Marla, and we did one of your shows from there. And once with a couple, Michael and Marty Perry. Mm-hmm. Do you know the Perrys? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
And he is so interesting, and he was, in the front of this room, and there were probably 8 of us in this room, and he was, with no knowledge of what happened up there, was explaining what happened up there, and we were all on the edge of our seat going, because we all knew. Mm-hmm. But what he did say one time, because David made a movie about it. David made a movie called The House at the End of the Drive, and it's a fun movie, a really interesting concept, because and I'm going off on a tangent now, but the book, it has to do with a man who bought a house 4 doors down from where a horrible murder happened in 1969. Now, in the house, the Jeff Franklin house that's there on the property where the murders occurred, that house has one original wall in it from the Tate house. I believe it was a kitchen wall, and they built the new house around it.
Oh, really?
So, the premise of David's movie is it was the anniversary of the Tate murders, but they didn't say the Tate murders in the movie. And these 4 people who were represented, Sharon J., Abigail, and Boychuk, walked onto the property because they were curious about it and touched that wall and were transported back to 1969. And they were representing those murder victims, and they knew what was going to be happening on that day. It was the anniversary, you know. So it was a really interesting film. And so, you know, Michael Perry's in front of this group and explaining, you know, all these different things. And he said, Sharon is coming through right now. And she wants to say, I think I approve. I think you're doing I think your movie is a good thing. And David, you know, David was really, you know, he was really touched. And he said, well, you know, thank you. It's really good to hear. He goes, no, not you. And he pointed to me. He said, you.
Oh, ouch.
It was,
ouch.
It was a little uncomfortable, to say the least. But it was, I don't know, it was kind of funny. I don't even know why I brought that up, but I thought it was a funny story.
I like it. Yeah, it is a funny story.
Those are good stories because of the fact that you never know what's going to turn up. And what do we always say? The other side never tells you what you want to hear, but what you really want, what you really need to hear. Yeah, and that's a prime example of it. Now, Scott, you guys were talking about Albert Dekker, and a lot of our listeners they're a little bit younger. Would you go into a little bit about who Albert Dekker was and well, what happened to him?
Well, I mean, 90% of the people who are older, my age and older, don't know who Albert Dekker was, except for the fact that he died in such a spectacular fashion. He wasn't, a superstar. He was in a few movies. The only starring role he ever had was in a film called Dr. Cyclops. I think he was in the Wild Bunch. He was the sheriff in the Wild Bunch.
Okay,
and,
I remember him. I remember him definitely.
Okay, he was like the baddie, wasn't he?
Right. He was good. That was an excellent movie.
Yeah. Okay. So that was released posthumously. He had completed that movie before he died. But Dekker was expected by his girlfriend. I think hadn't heard from him in a couple of days, and went to his apartment, and no one was answering. No one was answering the phone. So they got the building manager to open up the door, and everything looked fine except for when they walked into the bathroom, and that's when they found Dekker in the bathtub. He was nearly nude in the bathtub. He'd been dead for several days. He had a horse's bit in his mouth. He had chains around his. How did this go? Forgive me. I'm sort of out of practice when I used to describe this on the tour. He had his legs were tied together in a knot with rope. His hands were handcuffed behind him. In his hand was a rope that went over the shower rod, and it was around his neck like a noose. He had a horse's bit in his mouth. He had metal wires that girded his neck and chest. He had a sun rays drawn around his nipples and lipstick. He had a vagina drawn on his chest. He had slave written on his buttock, along with 2 hypodermic needles that were sticking out of his right buttock, and a couple of other choice words that were written on his body in lipstick. And he was found, in his bathtub, and it was ruled accidental suicide. He was doing, as they surmised, autoerotic asphyxiation, which is, masturbation while strangling yourself to increase the intensity of your orgasm.
Now, what fascinates me about this is people actually live in this apartment to this day, correct?
Oh yeah, and they don't know it.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you.
Uh-huh.
Did you? I mean, has anybody that has ever lived in that apartment known what actually happened in there?
They do now. Because we had just gone up to, my friend lived in that building when we were shooting our first documentary, Dearly Departed Volume 1, and we just figured we'd use his apartment because they're all set up the same way, and we were going to say it looked like this, and, the bathroom looked like this, and I thought, well, why not? Let's go see what happens if we knock on the door. So I did, and the woman she was on the telephone. I said, we're doing a little documentary. We'd like to, if it's at all possible, shoot in your home for, 20 minutes or something like that. We'll give you $50. And she said, okay, sure. So I said, we really want to see the bathroom. so we came back 20 minutes later, and I had his autopsy report with me. I had the death certificate, and I proceeded to tell her while on camera exactly what happened in her bathtub, and she was shocked, to say the least, but not bothered.
The look on her
strangely.
face was priceless.
It was. And she thought it was kind of cool to live in a place that had a bit of history to it. But if you rent a home, they don't have to tell you what happened in there. But if you buy a home, this is what's weird about the state of California. You're only obligated to tell people if something horrible happened in your house for 3 years. So if you have a house where the Menendez murders happened or the Manson murders happened, they don't have to tell you if it's past 3 years. So, and that, there have been some issues with people that have sued realtors for withholding information, but legally they don't have to.
Now, you mentioned the Menendez house, which is another one that was pretty grisly, almost kind of like a modern-day Lizzie Borden kind of situation. It's a beautiful house. You've driven me by there before. I saw it on the tour as well. Who's living there now, and what's the status?
Well, I'm not sure of any activity in the house, but I know that the man who lives in the house, his name is William Link, and he's a television producer. And he produced, weirdly, Murder, She Wrote and Columbo. And he's lived there for probably, I don't know, the murders happened in 1989. I'm not sure if it changed hands before him, but he's been in that house for probably 20 years. And I don't know. He's obviously settled in, and they've done renovations. I know that. In fact, weirdly enough, usually when something notorious happens in the home, they'll put big fences around it. Well, strangely enough, the Menendez has had big fences around it, and they removed them. So it's odd, but I can't imagine it not having some kind of weird vibes. I mean, you're talking about a mother and father being slaughtered while they were watching television, and Lyle put the gun up to his mother's cheek and shot her with birdshot. It was horrific. Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine there not being some bad vibes in that house. But I haven't heard of anything specifically.
Scott, let me ask you this. Have you ever walked into one of these homes and just got that ick feeling, or is it just the fact that, you kind of walk in and you understand what happened and you just don't even, it doesn't even bother you?
It's odd. I was in the home of Yvette Vickers, who was that Playboy model who, she was a Playboy model in the 50s, and she passed away a couple of years ago in Benedict Canyon in her home, and they didn't find her for almost a year. And I went into that house, and it was interesting. I mean, because you could see she had fell on the floor, and that's where she had died and literally mummified. And so when you walk into the house and you see that figure on the floor, not her, she was long gone, but seeing where she landed, and it's quite obvious. It's quite, I don't know, poignant, I suppose. It's moving, when you know what happened to her, and to think that, she died all alone in this very place. What was going on in her mind? Was she looking around when she was laying on the floor? What did she see? What was, or did she just die? You can't not, those thoughts can't not go through your head if you're in something like that. But the one house that really creeped me out was the Wonderland house up in Laurel Canyon, where the Wonderland murders happened, and that was something I was ready to get out of pretty quickly.
Really? Because I have to ask you, because the Wonderland murders is something that I remember, because it was a running gag, because you had John Holmes, the porno star that was in there, and the running gag all across the country was murders happen, man hopping away, and we won't go into the rest because it had something to do with a pogo stick, but we won't go and talk about that right tonight.
I've never heard this one, but I'd love to hear the rest of that one.
We'll do that off air. We'll do it off air. We don't want to skirt the family hour here, but what was unique, I think, about that was the fact of the velocity of the violence. that happened there. So tell everybody about that, because that is one of those, and they made a movie out of it, and I remember seeing Val Kilmer in it as John Holmes, and it really, I mean, I think it epitomizes what that era was coming to an end, what that era was actually like in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Well, the story is that John Holmes, was a junkie at that point. He was a big cokehead, and this crew that was living in the house on Wonderland Drive, which is how the name came about, were thieves and drug dealers. Now, Holmes was in with another guy named Eddie Nash, who was a nightclub owner and a big coke dealer. And Eddie, the story is that the Wonderland gang convinced Holmes to leave like Eddie Nash's back door open, and they wore hoods and they went in and they robbed Eddie Nash of a lot of cash, some drugs, and they tied him up and humiliated him. Now, Eddie Nash was of a particular ethnicity. That's what it is. Sorry. There's do not humiliate me. I believe he was Palestinian, and that's a generalization, but I think the point is, don't mess with me, don't humiliate me, or you're going to pay. When you have that kind of trouble, when you are that kind of trouble, when you're that kind of a criminal, you're going to pay. There will be revenge. And when he figured out what happened, he got back to Holmes, and he made Holmes make sure he got his gang in that house. And for revenge, they took lead pipes to the Wonderland gang while they were sleeping. And when you're talking about ferocity, it was really gruesome. And one victim actually, her skull was crushed in such that it saved her life, because it stopped it happened. Her skull happened to stop the blood flow, which she would have bled out. It's interesting, and so she's alive but has no recollection, and nobody knows where she is anymore. But it was pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Well, I've got you said that you wanted to get out of there very quickly, but I have seen a picture of you laying on the floor, almost in a chalk bark position, where one of the bodies was found. Now, for someone who had the willies about it, that's pretty great.
Got the willies. That is the exact moment I got the willies, was that bad. And I've done that before. I mean, I laid on the bed that Belushi died in, and I laid where Salminio was killed. It's something I do, and a lot of people don't approve, and if I cared, I wouldn't be doing it. But yeah, I did, and the place isn't that big, and it's on, I believe, two stories, and or three. I don't recall. It's been a few years since I've been up there. But yeah, the original crime scene footage is available. The police it has been released, probably illegally, but it's out there. So I was able to take that video and go through the rooms and see where all the bodies ended up. And the place was empty at this point. It was for rent. So we were able to go to each room, and when we were at the top of the top floor, facing the window out, we had of course I did. I sat in the exact spot where one of the victims was found. And, Laurel Canyon is really quiet. And, I do remember they were a rowdy gang when they lived there, and the neighbors hated them. And one of the victims, as I said, laid there for almost an entire day moaning, and people heard it, but ignored it because they figured it was some idiot in the house that was, a nuisance of some sort, maybe high or something like that, not knowing there were, 4 bodies laying in there bashed to death. So up in that room, all by myself, with that thought in my head, it was time to leave. So maybe I just creeped myself out, or maybe there was some bad vibes up there, or maybe there was some person lingering around up there. But I knew I didn't want to be there anymore. It's sort of like that maybe it was like, maybe I can equate it with running up the basement stairs. When especially those ones that have no back on them, and you turn out the lights in the basement and you run up the stairs because whatever's down there you don't want to be there. And maybe it was simple as that, but I thought it was a bit more than that.
Well, I've got 2 things. One, I'm going to vouch for you and the Eddie Nash type of person that he was, because I actually knew him before all this happened.
Really?
Really?
He was a patient at the doctors that I was working for, and he came in all the time. And I guess one of the words to describe him was slick.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always like dressed to the nines, manicured and everything. And you knew just looking at him, although he was, nice to me, but you wouldn't want to meet that guy face to face without a bunch of people around you. I mean, that was the air that he put off. Mm. And so,
That's right. I remember that office because he had a nightclub probably 2 blocks from that office on Hollywood Boulevard.
7 C's, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
just down the street. So, and the doctor that I worked for was also Palestinian. So they're, Lunsman or something. But he was really creepy. Now, as far as you getting kind of creeped out in the Wonderland house, you have always been the one to say, I don't believe, well, you've changed your mind about that, but it used to be, I don't believe in anything, and you did a great eye roll about ghosts and all that stuff, and, little by little, you came over to the dark side with the rest of us. But the thing of it was that, many of the investigations that we went on, you weren't like really reacting to anything in particular. I mean, you would kind of get the boogies just because we were there and they were kind of creepy places, like the Wax Museum when it was dark and, whatever. But when we went to the Mary Astor house that day, people called us and said that all these really horrible things were happening there. That was the first time I ever heard you admit that you felt something. You were standing over by the fireplace and you got a little bit creeped out because you really thought you felt something. So you're not as numb to this as, you may think.
Well, it's weird, Marla. Like in recent months, I've noticed, and this is I don't mean this to sound like I'm very interesting but what happened, I've had a couple of instances fairly recently where there's a friend of mine back home that back in Chicago that we're very close, and we're about a week's difference in age, and we had this theory that my mom. Well, how did this work? She had a twin that was stillborn, and we always thought that I was like the soul of the twin or something like that because we were that close. And a couple of months ago, we were. I was just, driving home from the movies or something like that, and I just got this ping. I said I gotta email her, and I just said, hey, how's things? I got this ping tonight. How are things? She goes, well, actually, I had to go in for emergency gallbladder surgery tonight. So a couple of things like that have come up lately where I've known something was wrong. And sure as anything, it turned out to be that way. So this is just sort of weird.
I think before maybe you just either didn't have the evidence or just didn't want to believe it, or just assumed that it took somebody special, somebody that's very sensitive to feel this stuff. When in fact we all do, and sometimes we just don't realize it. But you did take a lot of convincing.
I know that I've let down my guard in a lot of respects. I still stand by what I always felt is I think that 90% of the ghost stories out there are absolute nonsense. That people are so desperate to believe, and I don't, and I'm not. But I do certainly have seen enough on my own and experienced enough on my own to believe it.
I'm so glad you came around. It was like pulling teeth for a long time. just saying.
But I have to agree, because being in this field as long as I have been, which is, I will just say longer than half of my life right now, I have to say that 99.9% of the legends I hear are just urban myths. I go into homes that are allegedly haunted, and I find more psychological problems than hauntings. I would say probably that even locations, these haunted locations where people go and pay big bucks to go into, I'm going to be honest with you. You pay big money to go into one of these places, you're expecting something, so of course you're going to get it. And I have to say that I've been I won't say disappointed, but I will say that in many of these locations, I think it's the people themselves. I think it's their expectations. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, we think that this location is haunted, so it is to that person. And as someone who has grown up working as a psychic and a medium and have done walkthroughs, I guess I'm probably one of the most disappointing people that these types will ever meet, because I'll walk through someplace and say I got nothing, and maybe that's what it is. I really feel that, Scott. I think you're right. I have to agree with you 100%. We're going to take a little break before we go and browbeat Scott a little bit more, and you're listening to the Rev and Witch Show here on the Para X Radio Network.
Ideal Event Management is your top-rated paranormal events organizer. They represent some of the biggest names in the paranormal community. Whether you need help putting together your event, looking for a celebrity, or just want to pump up the excitement, Ideal Event Management can help you. Contact Mark at 413-478-3642 or check out their website at idealeventmanagement.com. You'll be glad you did.
You know, there's nothing like a great memory of a great time, and if you grew up during the 1950s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, boy, have we got the memories for you. There was no time more innocent than the 1950s or 60s, nor was there a time more politically explosive. Hi, this is Steve Shockley, aka The Shock. Join me live every Friday and Saturday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern for a Baby Boomer Rock with a Shock sock hop on rockwithashockradio.com.
For your one-stop metaphysical listening pleasure, Thursday night is the place to be here on Para X. From 6 to 8, you can find all your answers with the Astral Bag Lady. 8 to 9, hang out with your friends at the Black Cat Lounge. 9 to 10, our own witchy Marla Brooks stirs the cauldron. And from 10 to 11, join Sandy on Soul Chat. If you're looking for esoteric fun and information, then you don't have to look any further than here on Para X.
Imagine me, a dog, moving in with a human. I didn't know how it would work. Turns out, my human's pretty entertaining. For instance, every time I give my human his ball, he throws it as far as he can. And I'm like, dude, that's your ball. So I go get it. But he just throws it. Again. I gotta say, though, the more he does it, the funnier it is. I love my human.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hey everybody, and we're back with the Rev and Witch Show. Our guest tonight is the one and only, the effervescent, the iridescent, the guy that just knows where all the deadly dirt in Hollywood is hidden, and a couple cremains. Well, his name is Scott Michaels. And of course, we've got the lovely Marla Brooks on hand too, my little sister, the real witch of the two of us, right? Welcome back, guys.
Thank you. You make me sound like Alka-Seltzer.
You are. You're bubbly, Scott. People don't realize that. I enjoy talking to you because you're just like, hey, I'm Scott Michaels, and I am beautiful. That's the way it is. And you've got great hair like mine. None. And
I knew him when he had hair first.
You did too, didn't you? That's right. Oh.
Well, at least we grew out of the diapers, and now,
And we're growing.
We learned how to walk.
And I hate to say we're growing right back into diapers, but that's a story that Scott will be writing about us. But anyway, Scott, I was wondering, and we were talking a little bit off air about the death of George Reeves in Benedict Canyon. But what is it about that whole area? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of little things that kind of go bump in the night there, isn't there?
Yeah, it is odd. They had that Benedict Canyon. I don't know. David Oman, who has that house that's haunted up there, claims that he has a friend that did some geological survey or something that says that Benedict Canyon is above like a some sort of magnetic fault or something like that. Because it's almost a straight line to where the Tate house was, to the George Reeves house, to the Yvette Vickers house, where the woman I just told you about, and Jay Sebring's old house is up there, where earlier in life, Jean Harlow lived with her husband Paul Byrne, who died of a gunshot wound, probably suicide, in that house. And another couple of things happened. There was a young man who, God, I'm terrible with names tonight, but he was at a Halloween party and was shot to death by a real police officer. All these things happened almost in a straight line, straight up Benedict Canyon Drive. So, there's something probably going on there. There's also the rumor that, it's an ancient Indian burial ground, and if that's the case, because all of L.A. was Indian ground at one point in time, so it's not ridiculous to think that might be the case.
Well, interesting that you talk about a straight line, because I was watching an episode of Ghost Mines the other night, and they were up in Oregon in Sumter, and they, at that one point, were looking at a map of the mine and of the different places that were reported to be haunted, and they made that point, too, that it was kind of like the epiphany that everything ran on a straight line there, too. So there may be something to that.
Yeah, it makes sense, like if there's some sort of fault or something like that, underground, that's prompting, because there's probably rivers down there and all sorts of stuff that works as a conduit or some sort of thing.
Well, dowsers believe in positive and negative ley lines, and we talk about the Hinsdale house, which is the really big haunted location in Western New York. And dowsers up there swear that there are negative ley lines that meet underneath that house. So it does make a lot of sense. And let's face it, when we start looking at sacred spots and locations in Europe, they're all in straight lines. They all follow early pagan holy sites. And when you start really looking at maps, overviews, you're starting to see straight line after straight line after straight line. So I believe there's a lot to it. Of course, Marla might poo-poo it because, she's a witch after all. But no, she won't poo-poo it. But it really does make a lot of sense. And that's something that I know a lot about. And also, when it comes to native burial grounds, I gotta tell you something. I've worked with natives up here. I shouldn't call them natives. Native Americans. And native culture up here, and I actually excavated a burial mound back in the 70s with a college group when I was a little kid. And the one thing that you find out later on when you start working with Native Americans is their reverence of the dead, and if the dead are disturbed in any way, they get either angry or they are condemned to wander the earth. So, there's traditionally, if you want to go and you want to put a theory like that out, it does hold a lot of credence, don't you think?
It certainly sounds that way, yeah. I've never really heard about the theory of the straight line business. And, yeah, I've known that about the Native Americans and the stigma attached to, burial grounds. So that's really interesting. I didn't know that it was a phenomena that happens all over the place.
Stick with us, Scott. We'll take care of you. Right, Marla?
He's still blaming me for starting him out in this, so I don't know if I want to be part of this.
Whoa. Wait a minute. Let's back up a little bit. How did you ever start Scott Michaels into this whole business?
Well, I guess I was always into it, and on the tour, when I met him, he was driving for Graveline, which was a big hearse, and it was kind of creepy sitting in the back of that hearse. And then as we're going around these places, we're talking about ghost stories. We had Kenny Kingston with us the first time, so of course ghost stories. And Scott was just kind of really blasé about it and didn't think too much of it. And I just think over time, I talked about it more and he poo-pooed about it more. And then lo and behold, and I mean, this isn't like, a really great thing, but all of a sudden he had some kind of disturbance in his apartment.
Oh, really? Wait a minute. Scott, you got to tell me about the disturbance in your apartment, because this is kind of interesting to me, because here's a guy that deals in it, that really kind of, it's what it is, it's fine, but you had something happen in your apartment? Now, first of all, I got to ask you if you brought any of these objects that you collected into that apartment.
Yes.
Oh, jeez! What are you?
Now they are all out of here. Yes, they were here. And,
oh my God!
That probably prompted something.
Oh man! That's like the the number one hot objects now. Haunted objects. Everybody's looking for haunted objects out there, and that's something that I have to say that I've actually experienced, because I've known people that have brought stuff in to their houses that they've picked up. I know somebody that brought in these beautiful brass candelabras that were used at a funeral home, and actually had started having stuff going on in the house. And then when they got rid of these things, it all stopped. So you got to tell me, what happened to you, Scott? Now I never heard this story before.
And leave out the part where you say, and Marla, I still blame you, okay? Leave that part.
No. Leave that part in, Scott. Leave that part in, please.
I never had a Ouija board in my house before I met Marla.
It figures. Oh, my God. You are such a bad influence on everybody, Marla. You know that.
They love it.
Well, I had all these objects, and I told you I have a significant amount of the fireplace from the Tate house, and I had these things in my laundry room, and I have seen a couple of times. I've seen a figure in my house, and I know it's still here too, because I get that that kind of heebie-jeebie stuff, and I know I'm not going to look into my living room because I'm going to see something. So I don't do that. And plus, when things fall down, I know that something's going on. So I don't. I usually just curse at the person. Leave me the hell alone.
Marla, who does that sound like?
I've seen this person twice, and I had a couple of people that were gifted, I suppose you could say, come into my house, and they go straight to the Sharon Tate rocks, and without knowing anything about them, said something. There's vibes coming from these, most definitely. Now that I've got all this stuff out of my house, I said that stuff has calmed down. I mean, there was physical contact going on.
Really? What kind of physical contact?
Well, Troy, is who I'm married to. He heard. Well, he was physically, like a finger poked his back at one point, and one of the first times he spent the night, there was somebody that spoke to him and said, "Watch yourself," and he asked me, if that was me, and I didn't. It wasn't me, but so and then I was sitting on my sofa one time, and somebody sort of kicked my hand. Lightly, and it felt like it was my dog that come up to me, and somebody who sometimes bats my hand to pet him, and he wasn't anywhere. And I don't let my dog on my furniture, and for a while he was disobeying me and going on my furniture. So I had this little sensory thing that I put on my sofa or on my bed when I wasn't home, because it would make a beeping noise. So when I was, if it moved, he'd get off the bed or the sofa. And we were all, watching television in the living room, and the thing was going crazy in my bedroom, and the dog was right next to us. So all kinds of, little things like that were going on in here. Now that all that stuff is gone, I still wake up with those night terror things, and I always, to me, somebody's standing there, and I have a problem. And I literally wake up screaming. But they say that those night terrors are, not uncommon for people to have. But I do know that I'll be like working, I'll be hanging up clothes in the closet or something like that, and there goes the hair on the back of the neck, and the whole 9 yards. And I think, no, just get out of here, just leave me the hell alone, and it usually goes away.
That's the way I always deal with it. Listen, I don't want to know about you in my house. Get out now. Go.
I'm just chuckling, that's all, because it was like, it's kind of when I can now sit back and rest on my laurels, because I think now he's convinced.
You think?
No, that's good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and people claim that kind of stuff goes on at my office, too. And, it's interesting to say that this, we had someone come in to do a psychic reading in my office. And they come up with a late teen, early 20s girl who's a hippie, and she's very angry, and she stands upstairs and swears all the time, and the basic belief is that it's some sort of Manson girl. But this is what we found really interesting is they came up with this man who would eventually turned out to be Rudolph Valentino, and I thought, well, okay, it's always someone like that, past life regression. It's always Cleopatra, it's never
right.
The guy that carried her water or anything.
Yeah,
like that,
really.
You know what I mean? And it says Valentino haunts my place. Well, upon thinking about it a little bit further, directly across the street from me is Valentino's old offices. And next to the office is a vacant lot now, but before was a little bungalow that Valentino used to sleep in if he had to work late. And when they tore that down, I liberated a significant amount of the floor of that bungalow, which is in my office, in that room where he was being picked up. So there was a, click, 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 click. Eventually there was a connection. And so it was, just kind of interesting.
Now, do you have a lot of your memorabilia at your offices?
That's where everything is, yeah.
That's where everything is now? Wow, that has to be a tremendous collection. I'm just impressed by everything some of the things that you have. When I come out to LA, I've got to come out to visit, because you are the number one stop. I would say Marla is, but I'm going to have to pick her up and then go, because she'll never forgive me. And I'll have to buy lunch, too, which is going to really kill me. But that's a song for another day. Marla, what's the next house on the list that we were talking about earlier?
Well, we were talking a little bit about Hervé Villechaise's house. Now, that's not in L.A. proper. I mean, not in Hollywood. It was out in the Valley, if I'm not mistaken. And for those who don't know Rev Villechais, that was the guy that played Tattoo on Fantasy Island. And I guess life got to him a little too hard one day, and I'm thinking, and I could be wrong, that he put a gun or a rifle into his mouth or something and killed himself. But he did shoot himself on that property, and something about that, yes.
Yeah, well, Hervé was a dwarf, and that's a medical term. There are midgets and there are dwarves. Little people is the term that they like to use, but midgets it's a medical term. It's a small person that's perfectly proportioned, whereas dwarves tend to be a little bit unproportionate. They might have larger heads or smaller arms or something like that. The point is that they're not, completely... let's say midgets are perfectly proportioned little people, and here's a way to say it, and this is probably really, I apologize to any little people out there, but the Munchkins and the Wizard of Oz were midgets. The Oompa Loompas were dwarves, so there's a physical characteristic of both. Now, dwarves, because of their bodies being not proportionate, have a lot of internal issues with their organs, and they tend to be, like Gary Coleman was a little had kidney problems. There was another guy, David Rappaport, who was another dwarf. He was in Time Bandits. He was on LA Law. Again, medical maladies. And Hervé was one of those people. And finally, the medical maladies got to him, and he decided to end it. And he was living with a beautiful woman. I don't know if she was a Playboy model, but she was some sort of model. And I think they were just girlfriend and boyfriend. And he decided to end it. So he wrote a suicide note out, and which is almost illegible. And he decided to tape record his suicide because he wanted to make sure that this woman he was living with would not be held accountable. To uninvolve her in any way. He made sure to record his suicide with an audio tape player. And so, as legend has it, I have not heard the recording, but I've read a transcript of it, and you could hear him quite clearly, like fumbling with the gun and saying, "Okay, this is the time, this is it," and the gun explodes, just goes off, and then you hear this little voice going, "Shit." Because he missed, So,
oh my God!
These bullets went through the house, and there's, when friends of mine went in there about 15 years ago, there were still bullet holes in the door and the cabinet, the kitchen cabinets, and where the bullet ricocheted. The second time, he got it right, but with the first one, I think it's an inappropriate way to laugh, but then inappropriate is what I am. And it's just sort of an amusing story in a sad way.
Yeah. Well, any suicide is sad, but sometimes they just, in many cases, are snickered about.
They don't play out the way that the people plan them to. Sometimes,
Well, no, and then again, some of the ways they do it. David Carradine. I mean, you can't help but snicker about that. It's a terrible loss of life, but
God, how embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, you guys got to... Now, we all know the story about David Carradine, the actor who played Kung Fu on the Kung Fu series. Tell everybody about that. Because once again, we're talking about, these celebrities that were popular when Marla and I were children, and Scott Michaels was just thought of.
I know. I wasn't even born yet when Kung Fu was on. You guys are really old.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yes, we are.
Contrary, Tim, I do remember the show quite well. I was of age. And David died. Well, David died hanging in a closet, and I don't believe it was suicide. At least not intentional suicide. I believe he was he was doing the Albert Decker thing, and it just got carried away. The same thing. Now, officially, it was accident. I don't know how this worked. Officially, it was suicide. Intentional suicide. But Michael Hutchence from In Excess was another one that died hanging himself on a door frame, and he was naked. And the people, I think it was a dignity issue, and they said that it was how it could be more dignified to commit suicide rather than die accidentally of autoerotic asphyxiation. I guess 6 of 1 to me. But yeah, they both died at their own hand, as it were.
That's quite a way to say it.
I've got a couple of more houses to talk about, but I have a couple of questions in the meantime. From the ones that we've talked about before, and all the death houses that you are aware of, whether you've been there or not. Is there one of those houses that you'd move in a heartbeat if you could?
Yeah, the La Bianca house, definitely, where the second night of the Manson murders took place. It was horrible what happened. I mean, Rosemary La Bianca was stabbed 41 times, Leno 26 times. They wrote words in blood on the walls. But to me, it's a great house. It has an amazing view. And if I lived in it, then I'd make sure that it was there, because it makes me upset when people tear down houses like that, or for no reason, just tear down cool houses. But that house is historically significant to me, and I would, it's not like, I want to move into a murder scene. It's not like that at all. But to me, it's so important that it deserves preservation. And if I'm the one to do it, then I'd do it. I would. I would move into that house, definitely.
Okay. Question number 2. Is there one house that you consider to be the worst of the worst that you would never even consider spending the night in alone?
Wherever Marie Laveau lived, that's a house I wouldn't go to.
Now, see, that's a house that I would go to. I would probably feel more comfortable going into a place where black magic was done. I mean, where one of Crowley's homes. I mean, I wouldn't think twice about it. But I have to say, to go in and stay at a murder home, I would have problems. I had often thought about going up to to the Lizzie Borden home, but I just can't. I couldn't get myself to be able to stay there. I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is. I doubt if anything would go on. I really think that would be 90% of my own imagination if something went on. But I don't know if I could do that. And I find that fascinating that we're on polar opposites on that, Scott.
Well, I'm not going to say that I wouldn't get creeped out. I definitely would, but I think it definitely would eventually dissipate. The reason, as I mentioned, I would move in there is because I'd want it to stay there, and if that's the cost, then I would do it. But I don't yearn to live in a house where a murder occurred. Of course, it's gonna. There's an element of freak. A very good example that you brought up was the Lizzie Borden house. I would never stay in that room. I have no desire to stay in that room where those things happened. So I get what you're saying, but I'm just looking at it from a physical, historic perspective.
I have to agree.
So would you consider living in the Bundy house where Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman?
Well, the murders happened outside the house, so right. I think that's safe.
Except you'd have to go in the back door.
Well, I don't think that would bother me too much.
All right.
I walk through it, but no, I don't. That one doesn't freak me out.
That was a very bloody crime scene, I mean, to say the least. And doing a Google search, you see, bloody bricks, bloody sidewalk. I mean, a lot of these houses that we're talking about are very gory and graphic, and they do release pictures and stuff like that. Now, one house that a lot of people are interested in that was not gory or graphic was the home that Michael Jackson died.
Yeah, exactly. I that fascinates me because that was supposed to be like a rented home where he was living, and tell us, you must have a story about that.
Actually, no, I don't. I mean, he was renting this god awful huge house. It was it was like Louis XIV. It was all these ornate fixtures, and it was 1,000 rooms, and he was paying $100,000 a month, and and he sat in this one room with all these clothes and his stacks of drugs, and I don't know what he did with the rest of the house. If he even used the rest of the house, I don't know. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't get the fascination with him, and I guess he was a superstar. I just don't understand the fascination.
Well, you never danced to Thriller. That's all I can say. If you danced to Thriller, Scott, you would know exactly what we meant.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, but Scott is very good at doing the time warp. Just
Oh, I should have known that. And you know what? I almost want to sing, Marla.
Don't. Let me instead say that somewhere out there, and people can still get it, Scott wrote a book about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I bet you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. That's one of my favorite shows. I used to go out there with the newspapers and the squirt guns. I did that. I'll admit it.
Well, when I lived in England, I co-wrote this book, and I became very, very good friends with Sadie Corey. And Sadie Corey was a midget, and Sadie Corey was the little tiny lady that did the time warp. And she was 4'2", and she was in her 60s when they made Rocky Horror. the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and she gave me her costume that she wore, her little tuxedo from the movie, and that's in my office as well. I have a few other Rocky Horror, like real artifacts. I have Peter Henwood, who played actually Rocky the Monster. His script he gave me, and the models that Brian Thompson built and presented to 20th Century Fox. They built the church, the interiors of the church, and Frank's bedroom from these miniatures that Brian made by hand. So I have all that stuff in my shop too.
That's phenomenal.
Where can people get that book? Because now that they know, and there's so many Rocky Horror fans out there.
Yes, and I might even buy it. I might even open my wallet again, Marla, and buy this book.
I think you can get it for like $1 on Amazon or something. It's not,
even better. Even better. Wow, that now I'm really happy. If I get it for $1, I'm going to send it to you to autograph for me. You know that. And then it goes into a plastic sleeve.
I'm really proud of the book. I mean, I was able to track down almost everyone in that book, everyone in the movie, and get their stories, and it was a lot of fun putting it together. Because I spent, like you, a lot of time in the theaters when I was a kid watching that movie, and that's how sort of my life began. Was with the people I met there. It was kind of a cool thing. So it meant a lot for me to be able to speak to these people and get their own perspectives on the play and on the movie.
Now, Scott, I have to ask you this question. I have to ask you it. Did you ever dress up?
Yeah, I did.
I knew it. Yeah. I knew it. Who did you go as?
I went as a Transylvanian. I was, with the tuxedo on, and it was nothing. I never had the desire to throw on a pair of fishnets and platforms, or
I'm not. Listen. I'm going to go and plead the fifth on that one. Because that was it that you had to. It's just one of those things. And I have to say that I used to go up on stage and dance with it. Yes, I did. I had to. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now I'm scared.
Fun back then. And if you have been in recent years, I went last time I went to see the film at a theater was probably 10 years ago, and it's so joyless. It is just about being as foul as you possibly can. The people that go there, I shouldn't say that completely, because I'm sure it has the same effect that it had on me, but back then we were being clever, when Frank jumped into the pool, we would throw beach balls around the theater and stuff, and it had something to do with it. And now it's just, they're just shouting really just vulgar. And that, for me to say that, it was crossing lines with me. I just thought, what's the point, and every theater has its own cast. They have their own riffraff, and you have to audition to be in their cast.
Right.
And it just becomes not about the movie anymore, which I thought was just a fun, movie with a message. Don't dream it, be it. And it's I don't know. I think that message is gone now, and people want to make it about them. And to a degree, it always has been that way too. But it just, I see no joy in it anymore. But I'm old, I guess.
You welcome to my world, kid. You know what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're not even going to talk about Marla, but because she gets a little upset when we talk about AGE, if you know what I mean. Hey, now my next question, you like that segue, huh? I'm getting out of there before she's pointing the wand 3,000 miles away. She's pointing the wand in my general direction. Scott, here's something that, and Marla had sent me over a couple ideas, and this is something that I was very, very interested in. All these hotels, and you said that you slept or you laid in the bed that Belushi died in. What's it like to do that? I mean, and do they still leave these rooms open for that, where these celebrities passed on?
Yeah, they're still in rotation. I mean, the Whitney Houston room is back on the market. You're not going to be able to request it because they probably, I know they won't. Belushi's bungalow, I think you have to go through actually some sort of screening process to get that. But then if you're willing to pay $2,000 a night to stay in a hotel room, well then, they'll take it. So, yeah, I mean, these rooms are still in rotation, and what's it like being there? It's just, to me, it was just sort of all that happened right here, kind of a thing. It was like when I went to Paris and I went to the tunnel where Diana was killed, and I crossed a very dangerous street to get to the middle of it, to get to the very pillar, and in that pillar was this gouge from the Mercedes that when it hit the pillar, it was the first thing it hit. Then it ricocheted through the tunnel. So I was able to put my hand in that actual gouge where that happened in the concrete, and you sit there and you think, God, all that, what happened with her. I know it's a weird comparison between Belushi and Diana, but basically you're there, and all of that, the world's reactions, the headlines, the magazine covers, and the notorious aspect of it, everything happened right here. And that's sort of the moment that I think is really important. That's the historic moment, and that's it's significant. It's poignant. It's moving. It is.
I think
people think that all these hotels were so all fancy, like the Bel Air Hotel or Beverly Hills Hotel, whatever. But the room where Janis Joplin died is in a very small motel that people probably wouldn't look twice at, right?
That's right, and they're so kind there, and people will just call them and say, I want Janis's room, and they'll be happy to rent it to you. They're very, very nice. And as I understand it, through some other people that are sensitive to that sort of thing, Janis loves it. She loves it because people come there and they celebrate her. And for the week of the anniversary of her death, her manager always stays there, and Janis just got a star on the Walk of Fame, and they say Janis is having a ball. So in that case, it's sort of a happy thing.
Mhm. And then I bet people have stayed in rooms where things like that happened and never knew about it. And
people die in hotels all the time.
It's true.
So yeah,
I know.
Definitely.
The only thing that they do is and I hate to say this, but all they do is they just pull the mattress and wrap it. That's all they do. And I think I'm just trying to remember if they put them in storage or not. But that's the only thing that they do. And some of these wonderful Hiltons that I've gone to and stayed at in the last couple of years, I'm still wondering if the bodies aren't still stuck underneath the bed someplace.
Oh, that is such a creepy thought. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I remember seeing a Mad Magazine cartoon one time when people had a waterbed, and inside the waterbed was a guy in scuba gear, in the man. that was really freaked me out. And that's you do hear horror stories about that, people being stuffed in mattresses and stuff.
Well, I remember a German.
Well,
Go ahead. Because my story can't compare to yours, Marla, because you knew Eddie Nash.
No, it can compare, but all I'm saying is I still get the stink eye from my friend Ginny because she went to Vegas one time and was staying in a room all by herself. And before she left, I said, just sleep with the lights on because somebody might have died in that bed. And I was just kidding, right? To this day, I will never live that down because she spent the night sitting up. She wouldn't sleep in the bed and cursed me for, 12 hours.
Anyway, you're just so special. I mean, remind me never to say goodbye to you before I leave on a vacation anywhere. Oh my God. But I mean, I remember a German couple that were murdered. And they were stuffed, hotel beds are kind of funky anyway. I mean, you pull up the mattresses and it's all empty boxes and stuff underneath it. There's a space. And how I know this stuff, we're not going to talk about it, Marla. But anyway, somebody had murdered this couple and stuffed them underneath there. Housekeeping came in, basically changed the bed, and they rented the room out. They thought that this couple had skipped on the bill. And during the night, this unsuspected couple kept smelling something very, very foul, like rotten meat, they described. And they eventually demanded another room. And the next day, the housekeeping came in. And by that time, of course, it was well into putrefaction. and they found the couple underneath the mattress. I mean, that has always stuck in the back of my brain. And when I was just on vacation, I was doing a tour just like a couple weeks ago. I was like, I kept telling to these two other guys I was sharing the room with, I said, I think maybe we should check underneath there if you smell something foul. And then they all smiled at each other and said, well, that's us. That's not anything underneath the mattress. But that was just because we were drinking foul beer and eating wonderful foods. But this is all stuff that actually happens. And people, I guess, take it for granted that it would never happen to them. And I think that's the biggest thing that I always worry about when I'm traveling. It could never happen to them. And I mean, a lot of these homes and a lot of these hotel rooms, you never know when or how or if something happens into them.
Yeah, I mean, you figure 250 people a year at least go through, spend the night in that room, different people.
Yep.
Yeah, there's got to be some,
funky
stuff laying around.
I'm not gonna go.
I travel with I do travel with Lysol and a black light flashlight. I do. It is in my suitcase. I go everywhere with it because I will not stay in a place that has where stuff shows up.
You watch Hotel Impossible, don't you?
We just,
that one out.
You know what? We just had that conversation with somebody just before I left on that tour because they were talking about how housekeeping only changes the bottom sheets and leaves the coverlets on. Great, thank you. After that, I kicked that coverlet off and left it out near the door.
Oh, it's vile. Ugh.
Yeah, it's very vile.
Well,
very vile.
I know one hotel room that you didn't want to stay in, even though I kind of begged you, was at the Hollywood Roosevelt.
Oh, really?
That night, that after everybody left, Jenny and I were planning on spending the night. And I think I specifically asked you if you didn't want to stay with us, and you said you had to go home and take the dog out.
I did. But I also wouldn't spend the night in that hotel room. It's horrible.
No, wait a minute. Why
sit around and wait for some guy with a slit throat to come and
Whoa, wait a minute. Let's go back. You got to tell everybody this story because this is a great story.
Part of that, him not coming back.
No, about the guy, the whole thing. They put the whole enchilada out there, Marla. First of all, some guy with a slit throat.
And this, I have to preface this by saying it was Scott's fault that we were there to begin with. Not a bad thing. We got to investigate the room, but it was because Scott found out about it. And he told us about it. But he wouldn't spend the night. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, it was a horrible apparition that this woman saw. They call them cabanas, but it's basically like a 50s style hotel, 2-level hotel alongside the pool with big windows that face the pool. And traditionally, when people leave the hotel room and they check out, security staff will go in and do a sweep just to make sure you don't leave any phone chargers behind and things like that. And this particular time, a female security person went into the room and she saw a man sort of upright, hovering over the bed, not looking at her, but looking forward in the room, and he was in pajamas, and he had no feet, but they weren't severed, they were just, sort of faded, and he was wearing pajamas, and his throat was cut, and the front of his pajamas were covered in blood. And she spotted this, and she stopped, of course, and after she stopped, this thing whipped its head around and looked right at her. And, of course, she flipped and went outside and slumped to the ground. And this was all on walkie-talkie when she was talking about this stuff. She, a lot of people that worked in the hotel heard this, including my friend, who ended up with us that night, actually, when we spent the evening in that room. And after that, people were seeing the apparition, or they were seeing if they were shaving in the mirror, they saw a blonde behind them, and They would turn and there'd be no one there. And after this it sort of kicked off a series of people leaving that room in the middle of the night saying, that room's bad. There are bad things, or you won't believe what I saw. I'm not even going to tell you. Get me out of this hotel. Find me a room in a different hotel. I'm never going back in there. Send my stuff. That kind of thing. It's sort of happening fairly often. So I told Marla the story. And Marla took it upon herself. Go on, Marla.
Yeah, I took it upon myself. Yeah, let's do it. Sure, let's do it. But, we called in a couple of psychics. We had Kenny Kingston. We had Mark Nelson there. We had a whole group of people. Barry and Victoria, our so-called team, because we don't have a name, so it's just us that go out. And Jenny and I, because we did pay for the room, and the Hollywood Roosevelt is not cheap, Jenny and I decided that we would spend the night. And we invited everyone to join us. And somewhere around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, everybody really seemed to be in a hurry to get home. and nobody stayed.
No.
And I remember pointing a finger at you and said, but you, this was your idea, kind of. Nope, gotta go feed the dog. Or take the dog out. So, yeah, and it was one of those investigations, and I know I've said this before, but the room itself was just kind of not warm and homey, kind of. It was nice, it was clean, it was, but you didn't get that.
Even if there was nothing that went on in that room, it wasn't a homey-looking room.
No.
Lots of slate and mirrors, and it wasn't what that makes you just go, ooh, I love this room. There was nothing like that in there. Maybe that has something to do with it.
It might have, and then, of course, I don't know who the first person noticed was, but the bathroom was very weird because it ran the entire length of the room, and it was kind of like a tomb in there. That's the best way I can describe it. I mean, like the shower and the bathtub were in one place with the sink and the vanity and everything, but then you walk down that whole length, and then there was another little kind of not blocked off too well room with the basin and the toilet in it. But nobody that night, except for Ken and Kingston, went to the bathroom alone because nobody wanted to use that bathroom and be in there by themselves. So we all went on the buddy system.
I just kept the door open.
There's a lot of jokes that can go with that one. We're not going to even touch that line at all.
There might have been, but and I don't know if it was my imagination or not. Everything was fine. Everybody left, and then we were overlooking the pool and the bar, and they were partying all night until 2 a.m. And so it was fine then, but up until then. But at 2 a.m. it got really eerily quiet there. I mean, everybody was asleep. And it could have been my imagination, but it really did lend to a bad case of the creepies. And I, in fact, told Jenny, I said, I'm not sleeping, and I'm not going in the bedroom, because that's where the apparition showed up. And somebody had said that he only shows up when you least expect it. So I'm thinking, I'm going to get in that bed, and I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to turn over, and all of a sudden he's going to be looking me straight in the face. I didn't want that. So I stayed in the living room and went out on the balcony frequently, and Jenny was starting to nod off, and I told her outright, I said, if you fall asleep and something happens, I'm going to leave your butt here. I'm running out the door, and I'm leaving your butt here, because it really was creepy. And then Victoria and Barry, on the way out, were talking to some of the employees at the hotel. And the minute they got home and called me and said, well, I know you're there alone now, but, we really got some really horrible stories about that room. You really shouldn't be staying there. It's like, too late. Well, you could have come back too. So, yeah, we got stranded because nobody wanted to stay the night.
Well, geez, that's a shocker, too, wasn't it?
Now it was a pisser. I'm like, all you people, Yeah. But anyway, okay, so now you know, Tim. That's the story.
That's a good story. Hey, Scott, I've always wanted to ask you about one of the more famous cases out your way. And it happens. Britt Griffith just made a movie of the same name. The Black Dahlia. That is something that's really been fascinating to me over the years. Supposedly, allegedly, it was. I'm not sure if the guy was a doctor, but they say that he had actually killed her in his house, and the son is now kind of avowing this whole thing, and he had these collections of paintings where the mouth was distressed in the same way that hers was. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. And there are several theories about what may have happened to her. Nobody knows where she was killed. She was just dumped in a vacant lot. And the case will never be solved because the original documentation has been stolen. So they can never, ever solve that case.
Wow, I did not know. That I did not know. That's amazing.
Now you're referring to the theory that has been put forth by a man named Steve Hodel, who's a retired police detective who claims his father did it. He said his father was a surgeon. His father was also part of a very pervy crowd of people. He was actually put on trial for incest at one point in his life, and his own daughter still says she was, offered up to orgies until she was 14 years old. One of those pervy people was a man named Man Ray, a painter, and Man Ray painted a painting of a pair of lips, a very long, slim pair of lips above I think it's above the Hollywood sign or above the Griffith Park Observatory. I forget which one it is. So, according to Steve Hodel, says his father did it. Said that his father's homage to his friend Man Ray was this carving of her face. Personally, I think I don't think it's true. Personally, I think he's full of it. But unfortunately, I don't have anything better to put out there. But I do know that now he says his father was a Zodiac killer, and I'm just like, okay, well, there goes your credibility.
Yeah, right.
He's desperate to believe that his father did it. He's very angry. His father was never going to win Father of the Year, and he just he's writing a few books.
Now,
remember, Marla? Didn't we know Janice Knowlton, who said her father killed the Black Dahlia? Did we know her?
Wait.
She wrote a book in the early '90s called "My Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer." And she remembers the whole thing, and she saw Elizabeth Short stuck in a refrigerator, and she remembers their tattoos and all this sort of business, and she's dead now too. So, everyone's got the story, and everyone's got a book deal. So, in the middle of it is this poor girl who was sliced in half, and her hair dyed a different color, and her mouth cut from ear to ear while she was still alive. She was forced to consume excrement. She was sodomized and refrigerated. A tattoo of a rose from her thigh was removed and put inside of her. And this poor girl will never have any closure.
No, and you know exactly the exact spot where the body was found.
That's right, yes. And I believe in that spot, too.
Yes, you have.
I think
haven't you laid?
I was just gonna say, Marla, I think we're developing a theme here with Scott.
Scott Michaels laid here. Yes.
Okay, we're not going there.
Both of you. All right. I think there's some other business that we need to take care of. Good business. Because we're kind of winding down. I mean, 2 hours just kind of flies by really quickly as well.
Yes, it does.
But one thing I really do want to mention, and you do have a story attached to this, is, again, your E-special. That was on I think, Halloween, and it's showing here and there. But you have a Brittany Murphy story to go along with that.
Well, when we did the show, it's called Hollywood Death Trip, and Danielle Harris, who's an actress who's been in a lot of the more recent Halloween movies, she's known as a modern-day scream queen. Danielle was the audience, basically, and I was taking her on a tour of notorious death scenes in Hollywood, around Hollywood. And one of them was a kid by the name of Johnny Lewis, who was in Sons of Anarchy, who killed his landlord and then killed himself, but in a very strange way. And Brittany Murphy, who died under mysterious circumstances 5 months before. She died of viral pneumonia in her home exactly 5 months before her husband died of viral pneumonia in that very same home. We did a feature on the Hollywood publicist named Ronnie Chasen, who was gunned down on Sunset Boulevard a couple of years ago. And lastly, we did Dorothy Stratton, the Playboy model. And we, during all these stories and profiles. Oh yeah, there was the other one, the Ashley Ellerin, who isn't a very well-known person, but she was savagely murdered by the alleged Hollywood Ripper. I say alleged because the trial hasn't gone on yet, but Michael Gargiulo, the alleged Hollywood Ripper, allegedly killed Ashley Ellerin. Sharon Tate has nothing on what happened to Ashley Ellerin. Ashley Ellerin was stabbed over 30 times, but with such ferocity that was ripping and gouging and stabbing her head, and it was awful. And so these are the stories that we focused on. And since then, since we did the show, and I'm not taking credit for this, of course, because these things have they had a life of their own before we began. We just gave people sort of an avenue to get their point out there. We interviewed a young man who is making a documentary about the murder of Ronnie Chasen and thinks there's some suspicious circumstances. And last week he filed a lawsuit. It was in the Hollywood Reporter and a couple of other local publications to get that information about Ronnie Chasen's death released, because none of those documents have been released by the Beverly Hills Police Department, though they've closed the case officially. So there's some strange circumstances regarding her death. A gentleman on a bicycle at midnight in Beverly Hills shot her 5 times. And then when they found the guy a couple of weeks later, just to talk to him, he ended up shooting himself immediately without even speaking to them. And it was all just very weird and very tied up with a bow rather quickly. So that's newsworthy right now, this Ronnie Chasen murder. And strangely enough, the Brittany Murphy thing is now newsworthy again, because her father, Angela, who we interviewed in the show, claims that she was murdered. And they claim that they have evidence now that they found certain chemicals in her body that may have contributed to her death that weren't picked up in the toxicology reports at the LA County coroner. Because the coroner doesn't always test for certain things unless there's a suspicious circumstances. And then there weren't any at that point. And so anyway, that's newsworthy right now, because people think that Brittany Murphy may have been murdered. So both of those things were featured on our show. So it was kind of timely, and maybe we prompted something. Maybe we poked some people with a stick and got things moving. I don't know, but the stories are still ongoing.
Well, I read too that they said that her husband, now they're suspecting he was poisoned as well. Right. Yeah. There is speculation that they messed with the wrong people. That maybe I don't know how I can legally say the things that I want to say, but Angelo said, thought that somebody conspired with Simon to possibly, have Brittany removed from the picture. And then whoever it was that conspired with Simon to do that then turned, things on Simon. And they're saying that these particular chemicals are also used in rat poison and things like that. But as I understand it, these particular chemicals would show up in the same ratio as dandruff shampoo. So there's a lot of there's common explanations for some of it, but it's ongoing and it's interesting. And then I am in no way saying anybody did anything.
Well, yeah. So this, I mean, you're on E a lot. You have been over the years for a lot of different shows. And this one was very well received. Has anybody said anything about doing more, like a series?
No, yeah. I had, what's funny, on Halloween, I was on E for 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours of airtime on E. It was insane. I did The Girls Next Door, and I did a show called The 20 Most Horrifying Hollywood Murders, and then we did Hollywood Death Trip, and it was crazy to get 3.5 hours on E Halloween airtime, but that was pretty cool. But yeah, I'm under a sort of contract with E until the end of the year. It's up to them what they want to do. As far as, maybe do another special, maybe do another series. Who knows? I'd like to. I look at this show as possibly some sort of like a reboot of the old Mysteries and Scandals show. I know that E is getting back to doing their documentaries again. So, I hope that happens, and I'll certainly know by the end of the year whether they're going to. That's how long I am with them. That's when they have to decide by the end of the year. So we'll see.
Wow.
Fingers crossed. Yes,
exactly. Well, also,
I might be able to start paying bills.
Well, that would be nice.
That would be nice.
Well, also, though, but you're doing some stuff on your own. I mean, you've got your DVDs, and you're also doing something called DDTV.
Yeah, we've been, our little sort of 10-minute films that we've been putting out here and there on the internet. James Dean, The Death of James Dean. We did the Blondes, Jane Mansfield and Yvette Vickers, and we did it on The Doors, meaning the door from Divine's hotel room and George Burns' house, and how I've acquired them and how they're now in my shop. So we put these little films together, and we're actually going to be releasing a collection of these on DVD. It's called Dearly Departed Volume 2, and they hopefully will be out in within the next month, fingers crossed. But it'd just be nice to me to have them all in one place and to be able to watch them all at once. And I'm really proud of these films. I think they're a lot of fun, and people seem to like them. And like with the E show, they were well received. People watch them, and the E people were really happy with our show. So, maybe I do have a career in television. Who knows?
You might. You've got a face for it. You've got a voice for it. You're good.
I think so.
Unlike us, who just have, the face for radio.
That's it.
Well, also, you've got a lot of very neat stuff exhibited at your dearly departed brick-and-mortar store on Sunset Boulevard. Do you have any new acquisitions?
Yeah, actually, we just received a gift of several items that belong to Jean Harlow. We have a blouse that belonged to her. We have a bracelet that belonged to her. These things were originally given to her, or originally acquired by her old assistant, and also some gifts that Jean gave her assistant, a hand mirror and a little compact. And what else I know? There's a couple of more things that are in this cabinet that belong to Harlow, but I'm really honored to have them in my shop, and they were sort of thrown to the wind. And I don't know where they ended up going, but it's nice to have Harlow back in Hollywood. I'm very honored that this person chose to gift them to the tour, and now everyone can enjoy these items.
Now, Scott, I have to ask you this. Now, I am a huge... Well, I'm one of these guys that wherever I go, I look for the strange and unusual. I'm always looking for tours, something to take me other places, something that will really, when I'm out there, I want to remember this. I want to be able to have a great experience. Tell me you have something lined up for Christmas.
I don't.
No, don't tell me that. You've got to do something special for Christmas. I don't care if it's your hot pants and a Liberace. A little Liberace outfit with a little Santa hat, something. You have to do something for Christmas, because that is going to be so great for you to jump in and do that. I mean, I know that I would love to do that.
What would you do for Christmas?
Well, come on.
I mean, I just sort of think you'd want something Christmas themed.
Listen, put some tinsel in the damn place. You're good.
Well, I do have my Sharon Tate Christmas tree in my office that I have underneath it.
Are you?
No, it's terrible and terrible taste. Terrible taste. I shouldn't even.
Yes,
well,
you should.
Okay.
Come on.
Go ahead.
It was underneath it. Underneath the tree, I've wrapped up a carving fork and a clock radio. That Stephen Parent was. It's symbolic of the one that Stephen Parent was carrying, and a can of Folgers coffee with little bows on them. And that's my little homage. Of course, it's a black tree with red bulbs on it and red lights, and that's my tree.
I should know better than to go and ask you about Christmas. Hey, we are on that note. Tell everybody about your tours. Let them know how to get a hold of you, and well, what's new in the
Find a
wild
Death
world?
also.
Yeah. Oh my God!
Well,
Yes, Find a Death
is a work in progress. Always has been. It's my. It was a blog before anyone knew what a blog was, I suppose, and where I document the ends of people's lives. I'm constantly changing things, constantly adding information. Today I spent a couple of hours working on Walt Disney's page because today's the 85th anniversary of Mickey Mouse's birth. This week it was Mickey Mouse's anniversary, his 85th birthday. So I put together an updated Walt Disney story with more about his death. Like, did you know that Walt Disney was partially responsible for his own mother's death?
No.
He bought a house for his mother and father. They were from Kansas City. And for their 50th anniversary, he moved them out here to Hollywood, North Hollywood, or Toluca Lake, and bought them a house. And he had the technicians or the people that worked at Disney Studios install a gas heater in his parents' house. And they didn't do it properly, and his mother asphyxiated. His father, woke up, but his mother never did. And so Walt always carried around a lot of guilt about that. So that's what I assemble and find it out, the things you didn't know about the things you thought you knew everything about, the sort of trivia, if you will. And then there's our tour, which is just a geographic version of findadeath.com. It's a 2.5 to 3 hour tour of the death styles of the rich and famous. It's murder scenes, it's scandal scenes, it's notorious locations, and or just plain old, lovely deaths, dispelling myths that have been created over the years by a particular poisonous writer who wrote a book called Hollywood Babylon, which is just a load of nonsense. And so a lot of what we do is disproving, myths. So along with showing people some cool stuff in L.A. So I'm really proud of the tour. We have a tour devoted strictly to the Manson murders that goes on Saturday mornings, 3.5 hours. We go to where the murders occurred, where the victims lived, where the victims worked. So it's not solely about the murders. It gives you a bit more insight of the victims as well. And we retrace the murderer's steps, where they hosed off the blood after the murders, where they threw the clothes off the cliff, that kind of a thing. And we also have a very simple movie locations tour that we show films on the bus, about 50 films while you're watching on the screen. It's right out the window, so it's an instant gratification thing. So those are the tours that we have on offer on a regular basis, and I'm really proud of them.
And the websites are?
dearlydepartedtours.com. Make sure there's an S on there. And findadeath.com. But you go to either and you'll find it, or just search for Murder Tour in L.A. Because they ripped us off on American Horror Story, right?
No,
I didn't know that.
I think you did know that, but I think I might have told you, but I might have said it in passing. But yeah, American Horror Story Season 1, The Haunted House. They contacted me early into the production, saying that there's this new show coming out, and it's got Jessica Lange, and it's a horror series, and we wanted to talk to you about your tour and some details about it and the van and that sort of a thing, and then they just stopped calling. And lo and behold, the show premiered, and a couple of episodes in, out came the Murder Tour, the Eternal Darkness Tour of the murders in L.A.
Oh, my
with a
God.
logo that looks suspiciously like mine. So my nose was out of joint for a little while, but then I thought, well, if they look up Murder Tour in L.A., they're just going to find me anyway. And then when season 1 was released on DVD, Fox invited me to the party and had me speak at the party, and it was their kind of way of acknowledging I think that they were based their tour on us. So that's quite flattering, actually. It was say my nose was out of joint at the beginning, but it's imitation, isn't it? It's the sincere form of flattery, as long as it's not competition.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Now that was a while ago, but
Wow.
yeah, now it rang the bell.
Well, I remember seeing it too. That because I had watched actually. Marla and I were just talking about that the other night because I had only seen the first season, so now I know. I have right now, Marla. Do you realize that we are having a little brush with celebrity ourselves?
We're brushing elbows with Scott? Is that what you're saying?
That's it. That's it, because he is special. And speaking about special, we're hitting that special time. You notice how I got us in pretty quick on that one, because we are
special. You got to read slow to me.
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to touch that line. Marla, we got to get going on that. No, Scott, thank you so much for being a guest tonight. You are an absolute delight. You're one of my favorite people, and you never cease to really amaze me.
Well, thank you very much for having me back. It's an honor to be back. It's an honor to be asked, and I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Marla, well, it's that golden time, so say goodnight.
Everybody, blessed be. Merry meet again, and good night.
Good night, everyone. You have been listening to the Rev and Witch Show. Please join us again while we explore the edgier side of the metaphysical world.